Thanks for having us be that important. Yeah. What I'm struck by about the book is that really is a book about so many things. I heard identity and self-expression, communication, family and relationships. And these are all topics that sometimes aren't taught in the classroom, but yet we think that kids are supposed to learn them or somehow have some capacity to be with them. And you put them so eloquently in such a real-life story. And it's a topic that some of us are learning to deal with in conversations with students and not knowing what the right age is, and really it's something to be looked at in how do you bring this conversation into the classroom. And whether it's about coming out or family or communication or finding people in your life to talk to, or really just friendship and love. But I think it's an opportunity to really look at what's the culture in the community that we're building in our classrooms and at schools. And I think if I went around and surveyed everyone, we'd all agree we want the same kind of culture and community at our schools and in our classrooms. But how do you actually effectively, meaningfully, and intentionally put that in? And one way is literature, for sure. Another way is through conversation and dialogue and engaging with communities. So I really encourage us to look at some of the issues that are blatantly there that maybe we're tackling in our classrooms, and maybe the ones that were there that we're not, or maybe the ones we haven't yet identified. And it doesn't matter if your students are 3rd graders, 8th graders, or 12th graders, because there are issues that are there and only you know what they are because you're with the students every day. But what are the ones that maybe we're not talking about? Or what are the ones that the kids are talking about that we may or may not be tuned into? And how can we really look at creating a community of tolerance and understanding? And I think all of us would say, well, we want that culture and the school does a great job of that, but what are we and what are we not talking about in the classroom? And sometimes we just don't have time to put things in that we might want to put in because we're driven by Common Core standards or different agendas, and it's not anyone's fault, it's just sometimes the way the cards lay themselves out. So how can we make sure what we want to put in gets put in and gets put in meaningfully? And literature is certainly one way to do that. So the question is really, how do we sustainably build that kind of community and culture? Not just things we drop in at certain holidays or certain things we put in when they come up in the news, but throughout a child's time at a school. And how do we put those conversations in or let them bring those conversations out in the classroom? And how can we connect it to service learning? Service learning is the perfect opportunity to bring in issues that we're dealing with on a personal level, not just in our community. Our community is however we define it. It could be in our classroom, our neighborhood, the city, the state, the world. So what's right there that we could draw upon and meaningfully bring into the classroom? So how do you authentically engage students in this conversation? So I see some head nods and I see some and it's you don't have to have the answer, but it's at least be in the inquiry of how do we engage them and how are we ourselves engaging with other teachers at whatever age, because kids are coming into our classroom with all different types of families, and some don't necessarily even have families they identify with. Some are super close, and sometimes they depend on us as their teachers to bring in conversations that maybe they can't have at home or that are coming up at home and they just don't know what to do with the information. So the book is certainly one way to bring that in, but I want to give you a little bit of time to explore with the people at your table the idea of a community of tolerance and understanding. It doesn't have to be all serious and significant, and it is important. But one of the things I think that Richard showed us is that it really can be done with a sense of humor, because it is part of life. And I think when we get serious and significant about it, life gets hard. And it doesn't have to be hard, and it really is just part of everyday life. And we can tend to be a little weighty, and kids aren't usually. And so it's how can we actually have this conversation just openly, whatever this conversation means for you, whether it's intolerance or kids picking on each other or kids being labeled because of a learning issue they may have or whatever it may be, but how can we bring it in and have it be fun? And it doesn't have to be a 10-week unit. It really can sometimes just be done over a course of conversations. So in your handout, Kathy was generous enough to supply us her 9 square, which is in her Complete Guide to Service Learning, which is over in the bookstore. And if you don't have it, you really need to get it. It really is a Bible, a guidebook, the yellow pages. Does anyone even use the yellow pages anymore? They still deliver them, though. Do you notice that sometimes? But it really, so it's in there, and this is a great tool. And really, it's for you to decide. I know some of you in here are single subject teachers, some of you are multiple subject teachers, some of you are not teachers in the classroom, but influence what goes on in the classroom, or just have opinions of what you'd like to see in the classroom. So the 9 square works like this. The center is where you put your topic, and in this case, we're talking about communities, if you call it caring, or tolerance, or understanding, or anything that you heard that Richard shared. It's really what resonates for you. If it's just family, if it's gay rights, if it's marriage, if it's relationships, whatever, you get the picture. You put it there, and then you go around and you fill in as many connections as you can make around the curriculum. So if you're a science teacher and you're a designated science teacher, you might say, well, I teach science, I don't really know how I'd work this book in. You don't have to know the answer. What resonates with you that would make it meaningful for you to connect in what you are teaching, and or connect with another teacher, and or share it with an administrator. And together you can actually create this conversation. You don't have to do it by yourself. So you're going to fill in the center, whatever you see fit as your guiding topic or umbrella. And then you're going to go around and fill in across the curriculum all the connections that you see that you can make. Those connections can be made through literature, community partners. It could be made through classroom content, whatever you see fit. But to be able to brainstorm a little bit here gives you some freedom when you go back to your classroom, that you've already done a little bit of thinking, because if not, it was a great insight that you had here, and then you got back to your classroom, and now we don't have time to deal with it, and this becomes a piece of paper on our desk that it just piles up, and we don't mean to do that. It's just life. So I want you to leave with actually some concrete thoughts. So in the middle, choose your target word. And if you're not someone who likes to write things out and this graphic organizer doesn't work for you, don't have that deter you. Just turn to someone and actually start having the conversation. And then go around and see where you can make connections across the curriculum. On your table, if you didn't pick it up, is the guide to Richard's book. Do read it. I read it last night. It's thought-provoking. It gives you a lot of just great questions to pose in the classroom, whether or not you use the book or not. Please take a copy. It is for you. Also, Teaching Tolerance is another resource. If you aren't familiar, it's through the Southern Poverty Law Center. Their materials are free. Their magazine is still published. You can sign up for their curriculum. You can just go online to Teaching Tolerance. I highly recommend their resources, just in something else to make a connection. Museum of Tolerance is here locally. If you've never been there, I highly recommend that you go. The Skirball also does some extraordinary work. And please don't forget to visit the bookstore before you leave.